Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, the pressures of preserving the past. We meet archaeologists working against time, conflict, and climate change to uncover where we came from. So we asked you, our digital producer, our digital team asked, well, where in the world are there artifacts that you love? And you came up with some beautiful treasures. Malika Bilal, what do you have?
They really did, and we didn't have to dig that deep for it. So we asked this question to our community, and we got lots of answers. Some of them tweeted to us. This is one from Bashar. He sent this, the discovery of the Indus civilization of South Asia, and you can see the picture of it there in present-day Pakistan. This next one is from Mehmet, who mentioned the Rosetta Stone, which gave rise to modern Egyptology and deciphering of ancient Egypt's past. So lots of good examples. We'll get into them in today's show. If you want to join in on that conversation, you can send us your thoughts to hashtag AJStream, and you too could be in the stream.
Hi, my name is Mariam Musammed Dabbagh. I'm a writer and researcher on Iraqi diaspora and migration, and I'm on the stream.
History is taking a beating, and archaeologists around the world aren't taking it lying down. The plundering of Syria's ancient treasures by Islamic State fighters, a reminder of the threats facing cultural heritage. But climate change and looting and even tourism are making it very difficult to trace the path of our ancestors. With us to talk about the challenges of uncovering history and the new techniques they're using to find it, from Arusha, Tanzania, George Abungu is a coastal archaeologist and owner of Akello Abungu Heritage Consultants. In Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Thomas Gayareta Cabrera is a Maya archaeologist. In Perth, Scotland, we have Peggy Brenesh. She is a Haitian-American archaeologist and food historian. And on the phone from Berlin, Amar Al-Azam is a history professor at Shawnee State University who is helping document the ransacking of Syria's ancient treasures. So it is good to have everybody here. George, I want to start with you. I often think when you go around amazing sites, archaeological sites, it's the guide that makes the trip for you. So let me show our audience here. Have a look back here. This is George, and these are caves. Take us through, give us a beautiful description that would make us literally, we have to go there, George, through the description that you're about to give us. Take us on a tour. Where are we?
We are in Mauritius, in this place, a small island in the Indian Ocean, very successful country, very multicultural, fantastic place, and they have history of very unique kind of history of labor. You have the history of the slave trade and slavery, you have the history of the indenture, and you have the history where people have conquered all those problems to become really sort of a middle state in terms of the economic achievement. And in that particular cave where we are, I am with my students of masters in heritage studies, and we're in a cave called Chamarel. And we are looking at the remains of some very important events that took place, namely Maroon archaeology. These were the slaves who rebelled against their masters because they wanted freedom.
What's the wow factor when you walk in here and you think?
The wow factor is that you can actually go and feel the spirit of the place in a cave where someone who was taken maybe from Africa many years ago, taken into an island, could not make it back to the country, decides that he or she wants the freedom, and he decides to rebel, and he goes to maroonage himself in a cave without anything else except the belief in freedom of the mind, the body, and the spirit.
Right. See, that is exciting just by itself. So that appreciation of our past, our culture, when you see, say, for instance, in places like Mali a couple of years ago, where the conflict in northern Mali affected all this amazing culture that had just been there for so many years. As an archaeologist, how does that make you feel?
I have a lot of interest in Mali itself. And for a long time, I have been writing about the illicit traffic in cultural property. And Mali is a victim. And what makes me feel so bad about it is that that heritage of humanity is so open up with the problems that have come up in Mali, which are basically the drug problems, emanating from the south, and also the wars and the light sort of gun trafficking that goes through there, and of course the chaos that have taken place in the northern part, and all those combined together, it gives a fantastic sort of a chaotic kind of situation in a heritage that is so deep, rich, both in terms of a communal achievement, in terms of intellectualism, because
So
let's not forget that places like Timbuktu.
George,
yes,
I feel like I'm at George's lecture here. George, how does it make you feel, though? Just a sentence, because the community is like, we need to interrupt George. How does it make you feel when you see that art, when you see the culture, when you see it being destroyed? Just give me a sense as an archaeologist. What is that like?
It breaks my heart.
All right.
It makes me feel as if, the world is collapsing. I don't know what to do, but I think I know what to do.
Okay.
And I try to argue with people and say, let's not do this.
All right. We'll come back to you,
because
George.
if we
George, we'll come back to you.
this-
The community want to jump in and be part of this conversation. And I know that Thomas and Peggy and Amr are dying to get in as well. Malika?
Well, it's that last thing that George said that it breaks my heart. And you and I were talking about this ahead of the show, that so many people felt that and feel that when they see things like this. The community also feels like that. This is a tweet we got from Ergo. We asked, how important is it to protect archaeological sites during conflict? And Ergo says, more important than ever, as the events of the last week have shown, we should be doing more. And he's referencing destruction of some ancient sites in Syria, Palmyra in particular. But this next person picks up on that same destruction, but brings up an age-old argument, Amr, that I'm going to direct to you. Sam says, it's a shame that the outcry over material destruction is often louder than hundreds of thousands of deaths. And he uses hashtag Palmyra. So this is an argument you hear, but that first tweet I read explained why it's important for you in conserving these sites during conflict. Why is that important to you, Amr?
Look, this is very important. First of all, we should avoid the binary. We either save people or we save, the cultural heritage. Please remember, people without their cultural heritage are a lost people, just as cultural heritage without its people is just dead stones. So the two have to go hand in hand, and you can't do an either or. We either do this or we do that. Both are equally important, and this is a very important message to get across. That's number one. Number two, specifically for Syria, Syria has ruptured across every possible cleavage in that society. Okay, ethnic, social, sectarian, religious, all these vast chasms have opened up. And Syrians today are fighting, but one day this war will end, and Syrians have to find some sort of common denominator, some sort of common space that they can reach across this vast chasm and try to heal themselves and try to rebuild their country. And cultural heritage is going to be that very important sort of common denominator. Just think about this for 1 second. The fact that you have two sides killing each other, fighting desperately to essentially control the country. You have the regime on one side, you have the opposition on the other. Yet you have people from the opposition side risking their lives every day to save this heritage, and you have people from the regime side trying to save the very same heritage. So even though they are fighting each other in this bigger war, yet they both care about the same heritage. And it's that ability to care for that heritage that's going to save Syria. Saving Syria's past is about saving Syria's future. Right. And that's why we have to care.
Amr, as you were talking, Thomas and Peggy were nodding their head. Thomas, go ahead.
I agree with what Amir is saying in terms of the cultural heritage and the people, and it's sort of like unfair to talk about people dying, cultural heritage sites being destroyed, which one is worse, they're both obviously awful. And also I'm sort of also heartbreaked about with those images that you're showing right now in the stream of all those beautiful places and historical places that are so old and destroyed, and all the information that is lost, and and it's ultimately is a loss it's a loss for Syria, it's a loss for all of us, really, right? It's this part of humanity that is lost. Heritage is unfortunately a non-renewable resource that once you destroy it, it's gone forever.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me show you something here back on my laptop. This is a UNISAT satellite analysis confirming that the Temple of Bel Palmyra in Syria, the main building, has been destroyed. Let me just scoot down here past this very painful picture of destruction. But a little quote down here from Angelica. Now she says, Amma, why is there no international coalition trying to prevent this catastrophe yet? But Amma, there are ways that you are trying really hard, not you, but other activists and archaeologists, to prevent these really important parts of Syria's history from being destroyed. Can you give us a sense of what you're doing?
Yes, of course. Look, as far as, obviously where there's things happening in ISIS territory, it's very difficult for our folks to do anything. There's just no way to do it. But in other areas, we are able to do things. For example, in the city of Mara, this is a small town just south of the city, the main city of Aleppo. There's a small local museum, but it also happens to contain one of the most important collections of mosaics from Syria. They come mainly from the UNESCO World Heritage designated site of the Dead Cities. Now, in that museum, what we've been able to do is go in and sandbag the collection of mosaics in there. We've basically gone in and we've sandbagged all the mosaics because the city itself is also on the front lines. It's been barrel bombed by the regime for months and months and months.
So, Amma, we're looking at this picture from your Facebook page. And so the sandbags, they're stopping the walls from collapsing, preventing the mosaics from collapsing. How are they helping?
What they've done is absorb the shock. And this is a tradition, this is an old method. It's not a new method. It was used very effectively in the Second World War to protect European cultural heritage from the damage and the bombing. And of course, the sandbagging, then when the barrel bomb fell on the museum was damaged, but the mosaics were saved. The blast and shock of the explosion was absorbed by the sandbag.
How is this museum doing now, Amma?
Kind of thing we can do.
How protected is the museum now? The people went in, they did the preventative work. There's even a way of actually painting glue over the mosaics to actually protect them as well. You can see me painting. Don't look at me painting.
Well,
have a look at the archaeologist painting. You can tell I'm totally empathizing today.
Yes.
So how is this museum doing now? Did that preventative work, is it helping?
It is, in the sense that we saved the Museum of Mara's content. If those sandbags had not been placed, if those sheets of Tyvek had not been sort of glued on top of the mosaics, and that barrel bomb had landed on the museum, those mosaics would be gone forever. Only 10 days ago, the building right across the road from the museum itself was also hit by an airstrike from the regime. Now, it didn't hit the museum; it hit another historical building across the road from it, about 8 yards across the road. But those rockets could have hit that museum, and if they had, I think the devastation would have been too great, even for those sandbags. So we do what we can, we save what we can, we document what we can, we make digital records of what we can, and these are young men and women, archaeologists, activists, museum curators, essentially going out there and doing the best to the best of their abilities, and trying
Amar,
to save what is savable.
Yeah, go ahead, Peggy.
Yes.
Amar, I'm very curious. I'm very curious to ask, where does the funding come from to try to preserve and save some of these museums, if not the artifacts themselves? And what
it comes from a variety of sources. It comes from a variety of
how
sources.
does the local?
Primarily
I'm sorry, I was just curious about funding and local sources.
Yeah, we get, for example, the actual sandbagging part and the Tyvek. This was a gift from the Smithsonian Museum in the U.S. And the training that came with it before was from the Hollings Center, again based in the United States. The current group that basically do a lot of our documentation are supported by the Prince Claus Fund from Holland. So we raise funds where we can, but obviously it barely scratches the surface. I mean, I'd like to say, for example, at the museum, we were able to sandbag the mosaics inside the museum, but we didn't have enough money to protect the mosaics in the courtyard, which is where the barrel bomb fell. Now, these weren't the important ones; they were sort of the less important ones, but they were destroyed.
Maybe I can come in a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
Can I really appreciate the work and the focus that we are having on archaeologists, but I think that the discussion we are having goes beyond the archaeologist and the archaeologist's responsibility, and it goes down also to the community. We can do everything that we can do. We can, do all these things, but as long as we don't have people on our side who are the community, it defeats the whole purpose. And so in the discussion, I think that maybe we should also be looking at what is the role of the community, and are this the language that the archaeologists are talking, the narratives that we are putting across there, is it understandable? Is it abhorred by the community, or are we on the train fighting one
page? Are you on the same page as the rest of the world? George, this is a really good point. Let me actually bring in our community, as you just mentioned them. Malik, again.
Well, it's on that point, George, that I want to pick up on. Again, this is Sezin who says, when you erase physical remnants of history, you can rewrite it how you choose. And she mentions, of course, that is the danger of this. You can pretend that nobody ever lived differently. George, I know you have a story outside of Mombasa when you went to someone's private property and you found something from the 16th century. Can you tell that story?
Yes, it's actually, I think it was the 15th century. I was talking about the 16th, but it was 15th century. We went to the mosque, and we were together with colleagues and my former wife, Launa Bungu, who lives in New York. And my daughter just sent me a message now saying, I'm watching you. She's in New York. And this is a place called Jumba la Mtwana, which is outside Mombasa. And we had gone there, enthusiastic young archaeologists. We had graduated, from Cambridge, and here we were, very enthusiastic, and we wanted to do things. And we went to this place, and we went to the site. The caretaker was not there for 2 days. We went and started documenting this mosque, which was one of the most important architecturally. It had domes and barrel vaults on the top, very rare. And after 2 days, this guy appeared. And he had the information there. The archaeologists who had come here asking for him, but he wasn't there. But to cut the story short, he came back. He told us, "What is it that you are doing?" We said, "We have the responsibility to document this. It's very near our site." Then we went back. He wasn't very happy. We came back the next day. He had actually hired people, and they had done what you cannot imagine. That 16th century mosque that had been there for hundreds of years, that was one of the most unique mosques on the East African coast, had been destroyed into rubble.
No. Why?
It was
Why,
into pieces.
George? Why?
There was no way that you could actually even try to think about reconstruction. They destroyed. That was the first time that I came into contact with reality, that people can take the law into their own hands and do it. And they knew that according to the Kenyan law, at that particular time, the only thing that they could do was to be, fined 10,000 shillings, which is about $100, or maybe 3 months in jail. And so for them to be able to remove archaeologists, remove the evidence, and make sure that there is no more mosque, you don't have to go back to the private land because you don't have anything to take care of.
Yikes.
So for me, this is sort of a history, reliving this very painful past, which at that time was so painful. And I thought that we had passed that stage. And to see what is going on now, it's really reliving a past that I thought I would never see again.
Wow. Let me just bring in Peggy here, Peggy, because I'm really intrigued by how archaeology is changing, how our digital technology might be changing what you do. Have you noticed anything that's changed over the years that you can share with us?
I would say probably one of the greatest advantages that we're taking part in is trying to come up with equipment and new strategies that do not necessarily make us break into the soil. Because let's face it, archaeology is a destructive science. The moment you start digging into the ground, you're disturbing it and probably destroying it. But with ground penetrating radar, and now with new scientists coming up with ways to use satellite reading images to look into the ground without actually having to have archaeologists come in and break soil, break ground, has been a great achievement. How much further we'll be able to go with that is still yet to see, because though we do have a lot of these images coming up, either by satellite or with ground penetrating radar, we do still go and excavate, which again, we still destroy the area in order to learn as much as we can in hopes to preserve more of it or some of it, and to be able to demonstrate and show the world these amazing cultural either landscapes or structures that are so relevant and still important to who we are as people today.
All right.
Well, Tomas,
I wanted to contribute something.
Tomas,
Yes.
and I want you to contribute, but I also want to bring in this tweet because it really follows exactly what Peggy said beautifully. This is Gago, who says that he is sharing his own experience of why he loves his field. He says, I fell in love with history as a subject in high school, and I felt ever since that when you want to understand the world, you must go back to where it all began. Human history is shared triumphs and grief. Archaeology is what pure records couldn't capture. So picking up on that, Tomas, I want to hear what you have to say, but when he talks about this shared history and finding that, I know you also had a find in one of your first digs that when I heard about it, it's not one of those really big ones, but it's a small one that does exactly what this tweet says. It talks about human history and what it was like in everyday life.
Right. So just to sort of like jump between topic and topic, the place where I work, it's in the Yucatan Peninsula, and the idea is that what we're finding there is that there's not, opposite to other Maya sites where there's a lot of polychrome vessels and really large buildings and stucco sculptures and writing and all that stuff that's beautiful that people draw to that. In this area, there's really nothing super spectacular and super fancy, and for other reasons, and due to that reason too, there's not that much looting, for example, in north of Yucatan, opposite to Guatemala and Belize and all these other places. So one of the really cool things that I found in archaeology is that when digging those sites, in our project BRAP, we excavated this trench on this temple from top to bottom, around 13 meters down, and we were able to figure out this whole history of the site that goes from 800 BC all the way to 1000 AD, right? And although, again, since archaeology is not only about really big monumental things, as George was saying earlier, it's also about things that are not really, it's about the natural landscape also. It's also about what places mean to people. So there's this sort of like idea that archaeology is big things and things that are treasures. But that's not necessarily true. It's also natural places, also the narrative that we create with while digging. So although, for example, my site is not particularly large or spectacular, I mean, it has told us, it has narrated us a story which we interpret the past, right? Because the past is a social construct.
So
we
Thomas,
interpret it.
Thomas, we've got a minute left, and I wanted to ask the archaeologists one place that we have to go, to tell our Al Jazeera audience, one place we have to see, we have to see if we possibly can. What should be on our bucket list, Thomas? Just one.
Oh my gosh, I would say Teotihuacan, Mexico City.
All right, thank you. Peggy, what's on our bucket list?
I would say, particularly for the United States, or anyone in the Western Hemisphere, you have to go to a site associated with slavery, like a plantation, especially when you're in the Caribbean.
Nice. All right. Not nice, but yes, interesting. Okay, George, what's on our bucket list?
I will give you 3, please.
No, you have one, because I have 30 seconds. George is so greedy. George, give me one.
Okay.
Go on.
Go to a place that you probably don't know, Somaliland.
All right.
Go to Las Gael.
And
look at the rock art.
All right.
It is absolutely a gallery of
and
international.
Who doesn't love rock art? Thank you to Amma, George, Thomas, and Peggy. The archaeology continues. We head back into the past at stream.aljazeera.com in the post show. See you there. Hello again, this is the Streams Online Post Show. We're talking about adventures and challenges that archaeologists find themselves having to take on. I don't know if you know this, but Thomas comes from a whole family of archaeologists. His mum's an archaeologist, his dad's an archaeologist, Thomas is an archaeologist. I'm wondering, Thomas, do you find that this is a profession that it's a calling, it's a vocation, you have to do it?
I wouldn't really call it a vacation, although it's pretty neat. It's pretty great to do it. It's pretty satisfying. It's a privilege also just to being able to reconstruct the past and being able to share all this information with other people. I feel it's a really privileged a profession that is very, very gratifying. I don't know if it's a calling for me, but it's really, I mean, I really, really enjoy it. That's why I'm doing this, and I'm probably going to continue to do it for a long time.
You know that Peggy mentioned LIDAR, or is like land radar, being able to see through the land. I know that's something that you use a lot. How does it help you?
Well, I don't particularly use it, but while talking about technologies that are current right now and that are able to sort of like map and be able to protect all these archaeological sites, LIDAR is a very effective one. So LIDAR is a technology that consists of scanning an area using a laser, and the area just basically, the laser is strong enough that it can go through the canopy and it can just register everything at a sub-millimeter accuracy. So it basically registers everything in a matter of, I would say, weeks, to a very, very precise scale.
So, for instance, if there was something underground that you had no idea was underground, rather than like digging and chipping away and maybe not knowing where it was, you might be able to see that there was a structure that was buried, perhaps.
Yeah, you're able to tell that there are structures underneath. You can obviously not tell the precise details of what is up down there, but you can tell. There's also other techniques, as Peggy was mentioning before, that are not really invasive, that are like ground penetrating radar. I know that there's a study that was released to the press in Mexico a couple of weeks ago. There's this site called Chichen Itza, and then by using magnetic radar, they managed to figure out a technique that's non-invasive. That means it doesn't destroy any of the monument, that can register what actually this giant pyramid had inside. And not only they figured out that they corroborated that there is a smaller pyramid inside, they also corroborated that the whole temple is built, the whole castle is built on top of a body of water.
So,
right?
Thomas,
Which has ideological
so you worked out there's a small temple inside. Does that mean that you're not going to excavate it, and you're just happy that you know it's there, or will then you excavate it anyway?
Well, that's a really, really good question.
Oh, thank you.
Because the thing is,
I'm now very happy.
As Peggy mentioned before, archaeology is destructive, right?
Yeah.
And archaeology, as we've talked about in the beginning of the show, certainly the prime target in things, in war conflicts like Syria, because you're erasing the past, you're releasing one past.
So Thomas, you can say yes or no, because
another.
we're almost at the end of this show. So will you excavate this? Will you still excavate if you know it's there? Is that just enough?
I don't think they're going to excavate it because that's a cultural, that's the UNESCO World Monument. Yeah. So they can't excavate it. So archaeology is destruction. That's the short version of it.
I appreciate the short version. Malika.
This is interesting because it's one of the first things when people online heard that we were doing this show, they sent in their misconceptions about what archaeologists actually do, and some of them debunked them themselves, but they still exist. So this is Stephanie, and she said, oftentimes people think that archaeologists' work is digging up bones and pottery shards only. They actually reconstruct history, all of it, to inform human behavior. This next person sent us in maybe the very stereotypical image that a lot of people might have, that this is all I can think of, and this, of course, is Harrison Ford playing Indiana Jones in the famous Hollywood movie from the 80s. So Amar, we know that these are misconceptions, but archaeologists do often have we do have Amar on the phone. Archaeologists do often have these adventures, and I know you have one where you were trying to dig up the remains of some artifacts surrounding Genghis Khan, right?
Yes, in fact, but just a quick word on Indiana Jones. When the first Indiana Jones movie came out, it was my first year as an archaeologist at university, and my professor then, her name was Helga Zieden, decided that she wanted to take us all, she took my entire class to see this film to tell us what archaeology is all about. And I was kind of, it was the first year I was kind of thinking about it. And after that movie, I said, yes, that's what I want to be. That's exactly the kind of...
And it worked out for you, Amma, exactly.
It inspired me. It inspired me,
Nice.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So anyway, but going back to the serious part, yes, no, I was part of an expedition. In fact, I led an expedition to excavate what was supposed to be then a possible final resting place for Genghis Khan. And really it takes you to a very remote and very far part of the world where often, you don't get a chance to travel. You experience things that really normal people, I guess, don't usually get to experience. In our case, we were out in the middle of nowhere. We were sort of miles and miles and miles from civilization. And, we kept being struck by one plague after the other until eventually we began to talk about the curse of Genghis Khan not wanting us to find his royal tomb. There's a huge myth story surrounding that. And we had to give up in the end and abandon the excavation because there was an anthrax outbreak right next door to us from the farm where we get our food, and we had to be evacuated from there. It was quite an adventure, to say the least.
Let me just wrap up here by asking George and Peggy, why do you do what you do, Peggy?
I do what I do for my ancestors. I am very much uncomfortable and unaccepting of the history, and I'll put that in quotes, that is relayed to us about enslaved Africans and we as their descendants. And we need to do something about that. And the more that we relate about, as Tomasa said, reconstruct and interpret the past, I think the better we're more informed and to avoid a lot of the social issues we're still struggling with right now.
George, why do you do what you do?
I think there are many reasons to the answer, but I'll give maybe just one. I think the fact that for us to be able to determine our future, we have to know our past, and archaeology does provide us with that opportunity to know the past. That is one reason. How I became an archaeologist, maybe by accident. Many people ask me, as an African, have you gone beyond the confines of the continent? And I'm one person who can say that I probably traveled the whole world, in Greenland, Iceland, New Zealand, and all, whatever you name it. And I think archaeology has provided me that opportunity to be able to exchange and dialogue with my colleagues in all these places, and to be able to appreciate what humanity is all about, what history is all about, and what we call community. For me, archaeology without community is no archaeology, because I think archaeology has grown from the days when we looked at it more or less, and Thomas has already mentioned that, as Indiana Jones kinds of discovery, into how do we use archaeology to be able to entrench our identity and plan for our future, a future where everybody accepts that diversity is really a resource indeed for everybody else, because we are diversified, we are different. And it's just the heritage of humanity that we are different. So archaeology does provide me with that, and I think that's why I do what I do.
It's been a pleasure spending time with archaeologists George and Thomas and Peggy and Amma. Thank you for being part of the stream today. Take care.